Hey everybody, this is Owen from Owen's Rock and Metal Podcast, and before we get into the action today, I wanted to take a few seconds to talk about Anchor. Anchor is a great app and it is free to use. It's the easiest way to make a podcast. Did I mention it's free? There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will even distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. That's the Anchor app or anchor.fm to get started today. Happy podcasting. And now, let's get into it.
Everybody, this is Owen from Owen's Rock and Metal Podcast. Welcome today to episode number 6, where we will be talking about the great, the almighty Metallica. Today we're talking about their third studio album released in 1986. That is, of course, Master of Puppets. But before we get into it, I want to talk a little bit about my guest today. I'm joined today by my friend Roman. Roman, tell the people how you're doing today.
Not too bad, man. Not too bad. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. For those of you who are new listeners, I had Roman back on episode 2 when we talked about Metallica's debut album, Kill 'Em All. So we're back again to talk about more Metallica today with Master of Puppets. Now, I am a huge Metallica fan. I love Metallica. I love all their music from, their early days to their current stuff that they put out. I think it's all great. This album particularly is one of my favorite albums by them. It might be their best, but I go back and forth between what I think the best Metallica album is. But for a long time, this was one of my favorites, and it still is one of my very favorite albums. Roman, what are your thoughts and feelings on this album from Metallica?
This is, I have to agree with you. This is like one of my favorite albums too. This is what I first started on Metallica. Like when I was first getting into more heavy stuff, this is my stepfather put me onto this album. He handed this to me and said, "Go listen to this." Put it in the CD player, and I was about 12. And it just rocked my world. I loved every second of it, and every song. I kept listening through every song. My favorite one on here probably is "Battery." Like the first song, just that beginning, that intro to "Battery" is just one of the best intros I've ever heard, and it rocks it.
Yes, it's so badass, and we'll get into the track by track breakdown, but I just want to talk for a moment about the just kind of impact that this album has, not only for Metallica's career, because before this album, they weren't really getting a lot of radio play, and even after this album came out, and really not until the music video for One comes out, do they get a lot of national recognition. But this was a big album for Metallica's career that kind of puts them in the big leagues of metal, kind of proves their place, and really it stands the test of time, and I think it's one of the best albums, not just in metal history or rock history or in Metallica's career, but I think it's one of the best albums of all time across all genres. I would put it up there as one of my favorites.
I would agree. I would agree heavily on that.
Yes. But yeah, one of the first albums you say that got you into heavy music, and it's definitely a great starting point. This, as I said, third album released March 3rd, 1986. So we are coming up on the 35th anniversary, which is crazy to think, but it's what can you say? It's one of their finest works. So let's get into it specifically. Let's break it down track by track. We were starting off with the top track, number 1 on side 1, Battery. You just said might be your favorite track on the whole album. I love this track. I love how it starts off kind of with an acoustic introduction that's kind of almost eerie and kind of like it's really intriguing to the listener, kind of like what is like going to happen here. And it's a similar comparison to what we hear on Metallica's second album, Ride the Lightning, with the opening track Fight Fire with Fire, which also has that similar acoustic kind of build into a really just heavy, just once that main riff kicks in, it's just like it's fast.
It's going.
It's awesome. I love the song, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on the song. I know you said it was one of your favorites, but anything that from this song that stands out to you?
It's just me when like I said, this is one of the first albums I listened to and really got me into heavy, and just I wasn't expecting how hard, like, it hit hard in this song. When after that acoustic intro, I wasn't expecting it to hit as hard as it did, and it just sent me on a roller coaster. And I loved every second of it. It was crazy.
Yeah, it's honestly it's a badass song, and I love when they do this song live, the live versions of it, because it's really just something where they can just play fast and aggressive, and the crowd, can just thrash all around, and they can just
Oh yeah.
have a good time. The energy at this song it's a great way to start off the album because it's the first of many great tracks to come on this record. I think and the introduction, like, kind of is much different than the base of the song, the entirety of the song, which I think is something Metallica kind of does well with the build up in their introductions, and then by the end of the song, it's this loud, fast, aggressive tune that's just in your face, and I think that's something that Battery really showcases quite well. And what else can you say? It's an awesome track, it's an awesome riff, and it's just something I love to jam along to, and just
I mean,
what else can you say?
before I
Yeah.
listened to Led Zeppelin and everything, and like the heaviest songs in Led Zeppelin were really like nothing compared to what Metallica is. And it rocked my world. And then like introducing me to Lars and how he played drum set, because I'm a drummer. Like I said in the last episode I was on, when I was featured guest on here. But I mean, um, it just introduced me to Lars and how he played, and I looked at it and I wanted to be him. I wanted to play like him, and bought me a drum set, did this and that, got a double pedal, and I mean, I'm nowhere near as good as Lars by far, but I aspire to be like him. And then just having Cliff Burton on there, dude, just that bass line
Yeah.
for him in the car, the bass just sticks out so well in this album.
Yeah, Cliff, for sure. We will talk about Cliff later on when we get into Orion. But Cliff, the last album to feature Cliff Burton, unfortunately, he was tragically killed in a bus accident in Europe during a tour of theirs to support this album. So this is the last album to feature Cliff Burton. But you can't talk about Metallica without the legacy and life of Cliff Burton. He was such an impact on the group. He really showed James a lot of how to make the music more complex. I believe Cliff Burton went to music school, so he knew how to structure a song and kind of how to make what they were playing, Metallica, how to make it better. And he was really an enhancement for the group. And it's a tragic loss, but Metallica endured, and they went on to create many more kick-ass albums after that. But the last album to feature Cliff might be their best. So it's kind of fun to think about, what might have been if Cliff had not tragically passed away in that bus crash in early 1987. But, would the albums have become even more epic? We'll never know.
Really, in my opinion, I mean, I love this album to death. I do want to say, like, I wish Cliff was still around, because I bet you Injustice for All just would have been one hell of a crazy album if Cliff was on there.
I mean, yeah, for sure. And Justice for All, which I know that's not the topic of this podcast, but we're gonna talk about it here for a minute or two, because that might be my favorite Metallica album as of late. It's so good, and who knows if Cliff doesn't pass away tragically in that bus crash.
If Cliff was still around, would Injustice for All like really would have happened? Or
who knows if like Injustice for All and then the Black Album and then everything out, like who knows if that even exists. Like there's so much what if that it's almost hard to imagine.
Yeah, but anyway, back to the topic.
Back to the topic. We don't want to veer too much off track, although that will be a whole nother episode. We'll have an Injustice for All episode. We'll have an episode for all of these topics. We've got nothing but time. But Battery, the kick-ass intro clocks in at about 5 minutes and 12 seconds, and it's just, kind of eases you into it, and then you're just along for the ride, and it's great. So then we get into track number 2 on side 1, the title track, the namesake of the album, one of their biggest songs. I am, of course, talking about Master of Puppets.
Oh, man.
I love this song. I mean, any self-respecting fan of metal or rock music has heard this song. And if you haven't, you need to stop what you're doing and listen to it right now, all 8 minutes and 35 seconds of it. And speaking of that length, I'm going to tell a story here about the first time that I heard Master of Puppets. I was in the car. I think my mom was taking me home from school, and Master of Puppets was on the radio, I believe. And I was really into this, the heaviness and that repeating riff and the big chords, the power chords, and just the energy of it. And then when it kind of slows down in the middle, where there's that like kind of melodic break, and it's like fading out, I thought the song was ending.
Oh, no.
And to my surprise,
Oh, no.
remember my mom telling me about the look on my face when the song kept going, and I was thrilled to hear. I couldn't believe that there was more. Like, it's still going, because most of the songs I had heard up to that point, they were maybe 4-5 minutes long, standard length, whatever. But like an 8-minute long song, it's which get into other bands, their songs are a few minutes longer than that. But there's so much captured in this song, and I was just remember feeling so amazed that the song it's still going. I can't believe that there's more.
It's just like a 3-course meal, man. First you get the intro, and then you get the slow down part, and then like the ending, bombastic, crazy.
Yes, the ending where it really brings it on home, so to speak. It brings it all together, and yeah. You got any thoughts on the track Master of Puppets, Ryan?
Master of Puppets? Oh man, dude, where do I begin? This song like just blew my mind away. I loved just the beginning with Lars and how he tries to match the rhythm with the guitar with him on the drum set. I thought that was crazy cool, and I just always tried to think like outside the box like that, because I was a jazz player in jazz band, and me playing in there, you got to like kind of match the rhythm with everybody, and I kind of aspired to be like Lars and trying to play along like that. But just the whole album is just a sweeping amount of emotions throughout the entire thing, and reading the lyrics along, it just there's a whole everything is just crazy and bombastic in there.
Yeah. Speaking of the lyrics, people, there's a lot of like lyrical themes and a lot of like interesting, topics that they're writing about. And I've read that Master of Puppets is a topic about addiction. I think specifically cocaine addiction, maybe, but I think the term Master of Puppets could be applied to a lot of different things. I think there's a track on here, Disposable Heroes, which I think kind of ties to the theme of Master of Puppets, something or someone that's controlling you, that, whether it's a substance or a drug or whatever, or maybe it's, your boss or your higher ups. I think it could apply to a lot of different things in life. The Master of Puppets pulling your strings, like, and well, I mean, like, I don't know. What do you think the symbolism of Master of Puppets?
Everybody has their form. Like, there's a lot of people out there with forms of addiction, like anything, like people who are addicted to cigarettes. Like, they're going to keep smoking those cigarettes, spending $8.50 at the gas station just to get them, and it's just causing them to spend more money. It's pulling, like it's saying in there, fucking Master of Puppets pulling out their strings, controlling them. They can't live without those cigarettes. They're alcoholics. They can't live without that alcohol. Or hell, even lottery tickets are addicting. People get stuck on those. And I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to interpret it, but I think the majority consensus is that this is about addiction and how certain things can control you, or certain people, or it's just there's a lot that you can interpret from this song, especially a lot of songs on this album.
Yeah, I think the bass line is definitely it's something kind of with like it has a relationship between control. Someone is above you, and then you're below them, and you have to deal with them.
Yeah,
in the Master of Puppets, or I like to think of it as like a boss or something like that.
Yeah.
But anywho, Master of Puppets, one of the greatest metal songs of all time. I would put it top 10 without even thinking twice. I might even put it top 5.
Oh yeah.
I have to make a whole list about that, and maybe that will be an episode down the road eventually. But we move on to track 3 on side 1, and that is The Thing That Should Not Be, clocking in at 6 minutes and 36 seconds. Now, I like this song. I remember thinking this is a really some say it's one of the heaviest songs on this album, and I can understand why. I believe they tuned down to get that heavier sound here, and I think it's really an underrated track to the casual Metallica fan.
It is. I do think it's underrated. I personally am into that heavier side of things. Like I grew up with like Sepultura and some other bands like that, some darker bands. But I just think personally this is a really underrated track. I mean, you really don't hear too many people say, "Oh yeah, let's listen to Master of Puppets." Okay, what song from the album? And you don't really hear too many people say The Thing That Should Not Be. You know what I mean?
Right. I think the diehard Metallica fans respect The Thing That Should Not Be, but I think it's not even that. The Thing That Should Not Be is not bad by any stretch, but I think, tracks like Battery, Master of Puppets, Disposable Heroes, and Damage Incorporated, they kind of outshine The Thing That Should Not Be in a way.
Like some of the songs in here kind of get covered up by like those top 4 on the album. And like people really recognize those songs from the album. Like this album for that. Like
For sure, and it's a great album through all 8 tracks. And I think the thing that I like the most about The Thing That Should Not Be, I think I love the build in there, and I really am a fan of that guitar solo. And it's kind of got just kind of a kind of middle of the road, just not middle of the road kind of flow, but it doesn't like get too gnarly on us. It just kind of stays in its zone, but it's great at what it does. And I think it's, another great song on this great album. I don't think they miss on this album at all, but we'll get to final thoughts and total review of the entire album in its entirety as we get towards the end. But any other thoughts on The Thing That Should Not Be?
No, nothing really. Like we said, it's just a little underrated than the other ones at the moment.
Absolutely.
But not the underrated, and really no one really talks about it that much, which is a shame because it's a really good song in my opinion.
It is a fantastic song. I think underrated is the word. It's the buzzword that we're sticking with for this song, I can tell.
Underrated.
So we move to the last track on side 1, and that is Welcome Home, parentheses, Sanitarium, clocking in at 6 minutes and 27 seconds. Roman, do you have any thoughts on Sanitarium?
Oh, man. Do I have any thoughts? I do. Like Battery, in my opinion, like this intro, like it always would give me like chills up my spine. I always thought the intro was crazy cool. It was awesome intro to start with, and it was just kind of I can't think of the word. It just sounded like there's like dissonance in it that just gets to me. I love this album, this song.
Right? No, yeah. In the intro, it's the open E string on the lower E string, and then he's playing some harmonic bits on the upper 12th frets, and then it just kind of like Battery, like you were saying, just kind of slowly builds, with the progression, and then similar to The Thing That Should Not Be, it builds up to its chorus, and then for the verses it kind of goes back down to where it's at, and then it builds back up, and then towards the end we're just kind of almost in like a cycle of just like blazing, riffs and just energy towards the end, and then just builds to this conclusion, and then it just kind of it ends. So it's low down in the verses, then it builds for the chorus, then goes back down, and then towards the end we're in there like swimwear. But
exactly.
No, yeah. And then another, I think lyrically about this album, like I said, there was lots of different topics that were discussed or whatever. This song's focused on a mental institution, and I think it's written from the perspective of the inmates or the people who are inside the institution, kind of almost, I don't know if it's like overthrowing or kind of a revolt kind of attitude, but it's just kind of different or kind of opposition to authority, which I think is kind of a theme that we're picking up on from this album.
Yeah. I mean, when I listened to this, and because I was younger, I didn't know what a sanitarium was.
Right.
And eventually down the line, I learned that like it's a place where they keep people who are mentally ill and try to help them or just hold them until they get better, or if they don't, they just hold on to them. But the way I think the song was written, in my opinion, so I think like this like you just said, it was the perspective of an inmate, but like it started off kind of eerie, kind of calm, and then got chaotic, and it was just bombastic, and how he was going through everything through the sanitarium. You know what I mean?
Right. I think I get what you're saying, where the music reflects how the perspective of the essentially narrator is feeling. That's reflected in how they build in the music as well.
Because in some of the lyrics they're saying like why his brain says like why my brain says rage and this and that, like he's trying to make them understand like why it's happening, and he doesn't know why he's doing the things he's doing, and he's trying to get the answers from them, but they're just keep doing, like, in my opinion, awful things to him to try and get him to stop doing what he's doing.
Right. Because there was a time where, sanitariums and, mental asylums there definitely was a lot of inhumane treatment going on there. So I think that's kind of maybe what they're tapping into here. And I think, it just really shows, we talked about Kill 'Em All a few weeks back. I think it just shows how lyrically their songwriting, and this is a big credit to James Hetfield, really evolved a lot. They began writing about deeper topics, and that evolution of songwriting continues as James and the next several albums begins to write about his own personal life and his own experiences and his own struggles. And that really creates some great lyrical content. But I believe James has said before that Master of Puppets is one of his favorite albums lyrically. And I completely agree, because so far, if we look at side one, Battery, it's kind of about just aggression, like assault, just battery, another word for like assault. So it's just kind of like, and that's reflected in the music. And then we got a Master of Puppets that's kind of, we said like the puppet strings, which,
or well, not let's not say addiction. Let's just say just control.
Yeah, it's we cut the theme of control. And then we have Welcome Home Sanitarium, which is, if you just listen to it, you might not really pick up on it, but it's kind of a narrative from a perspective of someone who is in the sanitarium, and they're taking us through their thoughts and feelings at their time there. So that's side one, side A. It's a killer first side, and it's only half of the album. So we've got 4 more tracks to get to, but I want to take a little second to talk about the cover art, because I think this art, in my opinion, and I'm biased because I'm a Metallica fan, but I think it's iconic. I think it's incredibly recognizable it should be 100% recognizable to all metal fans. And I think if you're a rock fan or even a music fan, I think you should recognize this album. I think it's definitely, I'm not one who's really a fan of gatekeeping, but I think it's common to see this on t-shirts for people who might have never even listened to that many, maybe like 2 or 3 Metallica songs. But there are, of course, people who are hardcore Metallica fans and just wear Master of Puppets gear. So I'm not accusing people, if you wear Master of Puppet t-shirts, you're a fake fan or anything like that. I'm just saying it's very common, and it's seen in a lot of different places.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of just detail in this cover art. So we got the big Metallica in almost like white, almost kind of looking like rocks covering the top, and then just basic white font at the bottom, Master of Puppets. And then we have, what is essentially a graveyard full of white crosses, like they would have at like Arlington National Cemetery for soldiers. And on one of the tombstones is like an army helmet, and one has a dog tag. And attached to all of that is strings. And the strings go up and pass just beyond the Metallica. There's the 2 red hands as in a red sky as it fades to orange towards the back. And that represents, I suppose, the Master of Puppets. And the crosses for the tombstones in the grave sites, which would be used for soldiers, that represents something else, which is reflected in the next track we're about to get to, which is the first track on side 2. And that is Disposable Heroes, clocking in at 8 minutes and 16 seconds. Roman, do you have any thoughts on Disposable Heroes?
I mean, when I first listened to the song, I didn't know what it was really about, but growing older and listening to it again and again, I started getting the theme that they're trying to get off, and it was talking about how with the military that they really don't care about you as much as you think they would, and you're just an expendable. You're just a disposable human being that they can just send out into the military, and if you die, they can just throw another one in your place. Like in the lyrics, "Back to the front."
Right.
They're just saying, "Get back up there, no retreat." And I mean, it just seems like they're just trying to. I feel like Metallica's trying to put off the impression that with how our military is in their eyes at the time, it seemed like they were just trying to give off the idea, like, hey, they're not really seeing you as a human being; they're just seeing you as an expendable soldier that they can just send off, and you can go die for them, and they won't care.
Yeah. This is my favorite Metallica song on the album. This is my favorite song off Master of Puppets. I think lyrically, I love it's an anti-war song. It's, talking, like you said, about the treatment of soldiers and how, soldier boy made of clay, now an empty shell, 21, oldest son, but he served us well. Bred to kill, not to care, do just as we say, finished here, greetings, death, he's yours to take away. Like that's exactly the chorus, and that's what's repeated throughout the song, and that really gets across the main message that, and it's reflected in the track too. We think of soldiers, these are heroes, these are people who are fighting for our country, they're fighting a good fight, and then that's disposable placed in front of that. So just reflects how Metallica, and I'm sure many other people, view the treatment of our soldiers. They're disposable heroes.
Yeah, no, I get it. And then like let's see, like what you just said, bred to kill them all, or soldier boy made of clay, now an empty shell. Like when those soldiers go through boot camp back in the day, they would just dehumanize the soldiers back then.
Right.
They would just take away their humanity, and they're just war machines at that point to send them out and to fight. And today, the military is a lot different today, which they don't do that anymore. Like for example, in the movie FMJ, one of the have you seen
Full Metal Jacket? Of course, you're talking about. I have not seen it, but go ahead and tell our listeners.
So in Full Metal Jacket, if you've seen it, there's a soldier in the movie called Private Pyle, and in the movie he comes in. He's not very smart. He doesn't have very much common sense, but he gets turned into this killing machine, into this dehumanized, emotionalist machine that is just out for blood, that's just there to help kill. And the point is, what they're showing in the movie is that you need to have both emotion and you need to have both a little bit of emotion and a little bit of dehumanization kind of mixed in to make you like the perfect killing machine. Well, Private Pyle was the perfect killing machine, and he ended up killing his drill sergeant and killing himself because of his dehumanization.
Okay,
it was just
Roman coming in from the top ropes with the spoilers. Apologies to all those who have not seen the movie.
Well, it's been out for like 30 years, so you haven't seen it. I mean,
I was just gonna say,
you should check it out.
Well, I'm no need now. You just ruined the whole movie.
Oh, don't worry. There's still another hour and a half after that part. So.
Oh, great. Well, great. Well, let me see. Let me look up when exactly Full Metal Jacket came out in 1987. Metallica's Master of Puppets was released in 1986. So I think that could be an interesting link between those two pieces of, I'll call them art in this case. The kind of sense that Metallica, the guys in Metallica, Cliff Burton, Lars Ulrich, Kirk Hammett, and James Hetfield, they were not the only ones feeling this kind of feeling that soldiers and people that we're supposed to look up to aren't exactly getting the proper treatment they deserve. Disposable Heroes. It's just similar to Sanitarium. It's a narrative. It follows a soldier, and then through his life, and just kind of examines, how in the song his life is planned out before he's even born, and it's already set. Like he likely comes from a military family. And it's his trajectory for life is already set before he's really even born, and he doesn't have a lot of choice. And just an empty shell made of clay, like the lyrics say. But
Yeah.
moving on to the next track, Leper Messiah, clocking in at 5 minutes and 40 seconds long. This is an interesting track. It's got an interesting count in. I'm not too keen in on the lyrics here. It has to do with televangelists, which was occurring. There was televangelist scandals going on with them getting tons of money from these mega churches back in the 80s, so that kind of ties into that. But I want to talk about the music on this track for a little bit. It's got an interesting count in where it's almost like it's out of 5, but it's not. I don't know what Lars is doing. Lars is an interesting drummer, we'll say the least, but it's like a 1, 2, 1, 2, and then they come in, and I find that interesting. I always like when I can hear, the guys counting in the track. I think it shows kind of them recording in the studio. That work that they're putting in that you don't always hear. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about here, but Leper Messiah.
Personally, for me, I really don't ever like. If I get on this album, I'll be honest, I tend to skip over this song.
Oh,
my opinion, because
one of your favorite albums, and you're skipping tracks. What is going on?
I'm just not a fan of this song. I'm just not a big fan of the rhythm and everything in here. I just Orion and then Damage Incorporated is just after that. I just want to get to those because those ones are great.
All right. Well, hey, we'll skip. Well, I'll take the Leper Messiah talk. As I said, it's related to the hypocrisy of televangelists, which was prevalent in the 80s, or so I'm told by Wikipedia. But
I believe everything on the internet, right?
Hey, Wikipedia is trustworthy. I don't care what no one says. I don't care what anyone says. But I like the intro here, and I don't like to sing on the podcast too much. So if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But if you don't, go check it out. And then it kind of builds similar to other songs. It doesn't start off as, low intensity and builds to high intensity. It's kind of medium intensity, we'll say it starts at, and then it just kind of ends in, just the screaming of lies, 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 and then it just kind of ends. And then we circle back to that main riff. Dum 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 dum. Just I think it's great. Roman is clearly not a fan, so therefore we will move on to the next track, Orion, and that is Cliff Burton's masterpiece. I think it's fair to say. The last something that was common for Metallica through their first 3 and even on their 4th album was to feature an instrumental. So their first album, the instrumental is Anastasia, Pulling Teeth. I'm a big fan of that. The second album, the instrumental, is The Call of Cthulhu, which is a real fan favorite. And I wasn't a big fan of The Call of Cthulhu at first, but I heard the S&M version of it from their live show with the symphony orchestra out of San Francisco, and I became a fan of The Call of Cthulhu, and I gave it another listen. And I said, yes, The Call of Cthulhu is valid at this point. I am a fan. And then we have Orion. I'm going to be honest. Orion, similar to your approach with Leper Messiah, I listened. It's the one that I give the least attention to, we'll say.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Maybe because it's an instrumental. It's sweet once I get into it. Orion clocking in at 8 minutes and 27 seconds. Don't want to leave you guys wondering how long it is, but maybe the length, But
I can see that.
Then again,
I can see.
The instrumental they have on Injustice for All, To Live Is to Die, is over 10 minutes long, and I love that song. Yeah. So maybe I need to give Orion a little better treatment. I could treat it, but it's a pretty sweet instrumental. So Roman, you said you're a big fan of this song, so I'll go ahead and let you expand on your thoughts.
I just I can see where you're coming from, because I think it probably could get repetitive or kind of boring, because my fascination with Metallica is definitely the lyrics. Definitely were like all the lyrical things they have, and their it's just like the stories behind the songs kind of thing.
Right.
And Orion really is just instrumental, but I try and pick apart the parts of that song and try and find my own meaning with just the music itself, with no words or anything. But I could just find myself cruising down the road listening to this song, and it's just the beat and everything come together and the rhythm and especially that bass, man, all come together. It's just I'm rocking down the road with windows down, especially in the summertime, man. I just love that song. It's awesome.
Right. No, yeah. I don't want to make it sound like I'm not a fan of instrumentals because there's no lyrics or anything like that. But I don't know.
Owen, I can't believe you don't like this song because there's no lyrics in it.
I definitely I like Orion. I just don't have much to say about it. I don't listen to it as much. When we have the Injustice for All episode, I'll be happy to have you back on for that one if you're willing.
Woo.
So, but I don't have more to say about To Live Is to Die, which is one of my favorite Metallica instrumentals. But I have no beef against Orion. Let me just say that now. I think it's a fine song. It's just the one I paid the least amount of attention to. I mean, you got all these other great songs on this album. Orion, you know, who knows? Who knows if it lives up to the rest of what is offered on this album, but it's certainly a fine contribution, and I don't want to diminish anything that Cliff Burton put in because, as we said earlier, this was the last album to feature Cliff Burton on bass, and in a way, it is Cliff's masterpiece. Would you go as far to call it his masterpiece?
Oh, Cliff Burton?
Yeah.
I would say it's probably. I wouldn't say it's his masterpiece. I would say it's one of his masterpieces.
One of his. That's a good way to look at it because, of course.
Because I mean,
yes,
Call of Cthulhu, man. That's
Call of Cthulhu is interesting. I think there was a lot of writing credits, including Call of Cthulhu has a partial writing credit from one Dave Mustaine, who, as we heard in episode 2, was kicked out of Metallica in the early days, but still his fingerprints were on the first album pretty heavily. Second album, a little bit, Ride the Lightning being the second album, first album being Kill 'Em All. And then we get to the third album, which is what we're talking about today. Master of Puppets is the first album to feature no writing credits officially for Dave Mustaine. So it's the first Metallica album to not have any Dave Mustaine contribution. However, Leper Messiah, Dave claims, was written by him, and I guess Metallica has not formally, admitted that or given him any credit. I guess it was an old demo from the early days that Dave says he wrote. I'm not too interested in the controversy of,
exactly.
versus Metallica. I think they're both great.
Yeah.
They've both done that for the most part. Buried the hatchet. They've made, appearances together. I think it was maybe 10 years ago. They had the Big Four show where all the Big Four thrash metal acts played a show, and it's pretty awesome. I think there's some footage of that on YouTube. So if you're a fan of thrash metal, you definitely check that out if you haven't seen it already. But moving on from Orion, we come to the conclusion of this fantastic album, Damage Inc., clocking in at 5 minutes and 32 seconds. So, Roman, thoughts on the conclusion to this album, Damage Inc.?
Man, I'll be honest, when I listen to the song, it's just all I see in my head is just like senseless violence kind of thing. Like it's just distraction, violence. I mean, it's the only song in the whole album where they just blatantly use profane language.
I never really picked up on that, but I think you're right.
Man, it's the only song in the whole album where they all blatantly use profane language, and it's one of the songs that gives. It's all 4 members are given writing credit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, all 4 members are given writing credit during the Burton Hammett era, kind of thing. Is what I was reading some things last night off going through some things, and it was saying that all 4 of them were given credit for this song. Yeah,
that is correct. That's accurate. I'm looking at that now. So that's interesting. I think it's interesting how this song begins. It's not even like it's like an acoustic intro like we had with Battery or kind of something like that builds. It's very just kind of like almost like, what am I listening to? Like, what is this?
Exactly.
And just kind of like, I think I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure it's something to do with Cliff. I think it's his bass that they're doing something to. I'm not an expert when it comes to that stuff by any means, but
definitely going out with a bang though.
Yeah, for sure. And we get into it, and then it kind of, you know what I'm talking about. It kind of just has that build, and then it's really open, and it kind of fades out, and then it's one of their finest riffs. Definitely an underrated riff, I think. I remember reading a quote from one of the members of Slayer. It might have been Kerry King. It might have been someone else. but they were saying that of all, because thrash metal bands, we talked about the big four, and there's other thrash metal bands that were big in the 80s and stuff. The kind of there was a competition going on, and I remember a member of Slayer said, something along the lines of all the riffs that another band wrote, the riff for Damage Inc. is one that I wish that I would have come up with myself. And that just speaks to how great it is. And I love the little break in the middle when, Hetfield just shouts go. And then it's just like, all right, we're taking off for the guitar solo here. And it's just a whole lot of fun. And then, we get to the conclusion, and just like that, the album is over. 8 tracks, released in 1986, produced by the members of Metallica and Flemming Rasmussen. And this was the second album that they worked with Flemming on. He produced Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and he produces the next album, Injustice for All. This album was recorded in Lars's home country of Denmark, I believe. And they pretty much showed up in Denmark with all but like 2, I believe, Orion and The Thing That Should Not Be were pretty much already written by the time they arrived to record in the fall of 1985. And then the spring of 86, it's released. And the rest is history. One of the greatest albums of all time. Some would say Metallica's best. Definitely in the conversation of greatest metal albums. I believe I saw a list from Rolling Stone that put it at maybe the second best metal album of all time behind Black Sabbath's Paranoid, but it's definitely up there in terms of recognition. So at the end of it all, we've talked through all the tracks, we've talked about our thoughts, and we've talked about our opinions on all of these tracks. But now for the final thoughts. Roman, what are your final thoughts? And give us a rating on this album, 1986, Master of Puppets from Metallica.
Master of Puppets by Metallica. If I were to give it a rating, I'd probably it'd probably be like a 9.5 out of 10. Like, this is an album I grew up on. This is one of the best albums, I think, in like the heavy genre. It's one of my favorite albums. I really can't say much. I'm very excited with this album. And then once we get to Injustice for All, I'll give a rating for that. It's Metallica is just one of my favorite bands. But
absolutely,
I just can't get over the fact when I grew up on this, and that intro, dude, it just hit me like a smack in the face. It just hit me, and I was on that roller coaster, man. I was going through the entire album. And then I hit Leper Messiah and I hopped off and jumped over to Orion real quick. But
no, Leper Messiah, folks, is not a bad track. Do not listen to Orion.
No,
come on.
It's not a bad track. It's not one of my favorites.
By Lars. Let's be real here.
It's not
invalid.
It's not one of my favorite tracks. All of you, I would say all the listeners out there, if you haven't listened to this album yet, you definitely have to check it out.
Definitely.
Don't skip over Leper Messiah. You need to listen to the entire album in its entirety. But
yes, listen to the whole thing. And if you've already heard the album and you're dying to hear more, I could suggest listening to the Master of Puppets Remastered Deluxe box set, which came out a few years back. It has 137 songs on it and is over 11 hours worth of music from the Metallica Master of Puppets era. I was listening to it earlier. It's got a lot of cool stuff from, live stuff, live stuff that was recorded, not even great audio, like recorded from a fan in the audience. It's got riff tapes from the summer and the fall of 85 when they were writing this material. And it has audition tapes from when they were auditioning a new bass player, and one Mr. Jason Newsted, who we will come to talk about when we talk about Injustice for All and the 90s, Metallica in the 90s. But my final thoughts on Master of Puppets from Metallica. It's one of my favorite albums ever. Can't really top it. It's one of the best metal albums. Sold over 6 million copies in the United States. Not their highest selling record. That, of course, belongs to the Black Album. But I think this one outshines the Black Album. Although Black Album, I think, is very good as well. And we will talk about the Black Album in due time. So if I had to give Master of Puppets a rating, I would give it, and this is the first time I've done this, I would give it a perfect 10 out of 10, perfect score. doesn't miss, no blemishes. It's perfect. I've never given an album a perfect score in here. I've come pretty close, but this is a perfect album.
Exactly. It is a perfect album. I'm only giving it a 9.5 because that little hiccup with my opinion, Leper Messiah.
Sure.
It's still a good song.
That's fine. You can give it that half. You can deduct that half point. That's perfectly okay. That's why I try to have someone, we pretty much agreed most of the time, but having a little different perspective is not bad. So, to all you listeners out there, we hope you enjoyed the conversation between Roman and I today. We talked about Master of Puppets. We had a great time. If you are a new listener, I'd suggest, if you're a Metallica fan, episode 2, we talked about Kill 'Em All. Episode 1, we talked about Led Zeppelin. Well, that was just featuring me. Episode 3, topic was Appetite for Destruction. Episode 4, Black Sabbath's debut was discussed. And episode 5, last week's episode, we talked about Medicine at Midnight, the Foo Fighters' debut album. So this is episode 6. Coming up next week, episode 7, I thought I'd do something fun with the number 7. I will be talking about some of the top bands from the 70s. So keep your ears tuned for that. Podcasts are released every Thursday. We're on Spotify. We're on Google Podcasts. We're on Anchor. All this is available at the link in my bio. You can follow me on Instagram, OwenW409 for my personal account, or you can follow the podcasts page, Owen's Rock and Metal Podcast on Instagram. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you next week. And as always, never stop rocking.